All right, guys, welcome. We're going to start a little bit of a new venture here today. After doing the Firepunk race series, we've done a number of these over our lunch hours. And I've kind of, for a long time, wanted to do kind of, I guess you'd call it a podcast style video. So most of this stuff is going to be put out in video form, but it will be more of an audio kind of experience. If you're the kind of person that likes to listen to stuff throughout your workday or whatever in your headphones, that's kind of going to be the intent on some of this. We're going to call this segment Firepunk Fridays, and we're going to talk about a little bit of anything. I guess my goal is here to talk some about current events. I want to have a lot of conversations and a lot of stories. I don't necessarily want it to be a formal interview. I want it to be a discussion. So I've got Landon here with me today. We're going to start in-house. We're going to have some of our employees on. We're going to talk about racing. We're going to talk about what they do here. And then at some point, I would like to get into talking with some of the guys, like maybe some OGs of diesel racing, some of the guys you don't really see in the forefront anymore. But there's lots of stories to be told out there and lots of good information from the good old days of racing. So, today we're going to start with doing a little bit of a conversation about what we have going around the shop. And then we're going to talk about hot topics, whether that's a social media item or whether it's a current event. And then we're going to go into a little bit of Landon's racing story and see what kind of stories he has to share with us and what he's learned from racing. So
absolutely.
Let's start with talking about what's going on around the shop. I'm over here kind of hide in the fab side most of the time, so I know what's going on over here. Sometimes kind of feel like I lose touch with what's going on over in the mechanic shop. So what are some of the big projects you've got going on over there?
Well, we just I just made a trip to D&J a week ago, and we brought back 3 crate engines from D&J that we've got slated up here coming up in the next month. Coming out for a highlight, I guess we really had a truck fight us last week. We had a one-day transmission from a customer from Wisconsin that came in, and we had a transmission or transfer case fight us that was corroded together so bad that we ended up we pulled the whole transmission out with the transfer case and had some issues. Ended up with air hammers and about broke the back half section of the tail section off just to get it off. It was kind of never really seen something quite this bad before.
Yeah, it's something we run into occasionally. I remember back in the day when we first started running into corroded transfer cases, we didn't really know what to do with them sometimes. I think we developed a system where we can drill a couple of holes in the bottom where you can get a pry bar in there and get those things pried apart. Usually there's a weep hole in the bottom there where corrosion gets up inside of there and stuff gets stuck together. So that can cause a lot of headaches, but I think this one sounded like it may have been a little bit more involved than others. But
yeah, it was more than just the typical grab your big pry bar. We had to grab the extra big pry bars and the air hammers, and ended up having to.
So if you're in an atmosphere where your truck sees a lot of salt and road grime and that kind of stuff, and you have your transmission out and stuff, definitely something worth paying attention to. What do you guys usually like? We usually try to put some silicone, I believe, in the weep hole area or whatever.
And we haven't done that as much as spraying it down with a lube to prevent
getting some anti-seize on the studs and some stuff like that. So just a little bit something to pay attention to. Then we also had Garrett Nissa's 2019 that we've been working on recently. I know that one gave us a little bit of issues in the last week. Putting an early common rail engine in a 2019 truck. So what are some of the issues we've run into there?
Well, with the 2019, the cam and crank sensors are different. And, more importantly, the front cover is different. So we're going back to the old style front cover, or the early style 6.7. And that's going back with this factor with the old style cam, CP3, crank gear, where we had to put all this together, and with the cam and crank signal being wrong, we had to swap the sensors over to the old style sensor. So that's something that's giving us a fight right now. We got the truck up and running after we got break-in, driven it down the road. Once we figured out we have a check engine light, that is somewhere between the cam and crank, we were having a miscommunication, and we're still trying to find out some gremlins, whether we wired something up wrong. Some little issues that we're running into with the newer trucks, where a scanner doesn't give us quite as much information between the cam and crank signal, where we're trying to figure out some kinks. But overall, it's been a really interesting project to go through and figure out how to accommodate a dual CP3.
There's definitely a good bit of differences in the 5th gen. It's not near like, anything that was common rail before then. We didn't have a whole lot of problem just kind of swapping the years around, and wasn't much of an issue. But this was a truck where the block had gotten windowed, and I don't know what was the reason for going with a 4th gen style engine. Was that just what he had a good deal on?
It was an engine he had bought from somebody that hadn't run before, and he had sent it back to Fleece to get refreshed before he put it back in.
Okay.
And so he's something he had on the shelf ready to go for something he knew that he could potentially use down the road.
So something we had done a good bit of homework on, and I know they'd talked to the guys over at Fleece about the compatibility of it, and we checked into as much stuff as we knew, but we're running into a little bit more than what we originally thought. So
and Fleece has been a big help with us in this, contacting them and seeing what their input from what they looked into it versus what we're actually finding. We've been working with them.
So we don't have a final fix for that yet.
Not yet.
But I guess we'll give you an update on that if we get that figured out. But that's one of the big things you've been working on. Is there anything else over there that really sticks out to you?
Well, we got a lot of work.
We did have a new tech start this week, right?
That's right.
So we're back to, closer to as many techs as we'd like to have, I guess. But we've changed some processes and stuff around here recently, and you kind of stepped into a new role. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I've been on the service side with the service manager, kind of overseeing the day in and day out of trucks coming in the process into the shop and coming back out. So I was heading that up, where now I'm more towards the overall shop operations manager of the shop per se. So I'm now where Josh took over the role of the service side, where he had been building valve bodies, and Josh took over service side. Now I'm kind of helping between Josh and Doubles and Lynn with the fab shop, and making sure that we can coordinate our day-to-day and look ahead to make sure that we are able to smoothen the process of our day-to-day.
Yeah, we're learning as we go. The bigger we get, it seems like the more management it takes, and the more things you have to coordinate together. So definitely one of those things that I guess growing pains is what you'd call them. But anyhow, enough with the boring stuff. The fab shop, we have a couple different projects going. David Large's truck just finally left this week. We did a good bit of work on that. I think we had put out a video on that earlier. Just got finishing up doing an 850 cage in Paul Edwards' truck.
He's planning on running 590 this year.
There'll be a 590 truck this year. Cody is working on Byron Klein's project. That is the Ford with the Enforcer power plant. So we just did first fire this week, and they were working on getting the AAM set up and all that fun stuff.
Lots of new wiring.
Yeah, lots of wiring. And then Ziegler's is, trying to get that thing ready to go testing before UCC as well. So that's kind of what we have going on at the fab shop. I won't bore you to death with all the details. So let's talk about a hot topic. So I've got a couple different ones to talk about. The first one I'd like to talk about a little bit is I saw on our Firepunk discussion forum, I believe it was last week, Luke Lewis was asking, he says, looking to buy my first common rail and was wanting to pick someone's brain a little. I've been looking at trucks that have been 1,000 to 1,200 horsepower. They've all been stock internals with the exception of studs and headwork. Can these trucks handle that much power on stock internals, or is it asking for something to blow? So that's kind of a loaded question, and it's something we've talked about for years, and it seems like this subject comes up very often, because these trucks are capable of making a ton of power on a stock bottom end. I guess the short answer to that question is, yeah, it'll handle it. But for how long, and what are you doing with the truck, and how are you treating it?
Because what's key is that you're making that 1,000 to 1,200 horsepower. What RPM are you making that at? And that's really the biggest question that comes in when people are asking us, hey, I've got a stock bottom end. What do you think I can make out of it? Well, if you're putting I guess
a twin setup at that level on a stock bottom end is a sure recipe for disaster. And I think people get hung up with the horsepower number a lot. In my opinion, I would much rather have a quick spooling, good street mannered 850 horsepower truck than I would rather than a 1,000 horsepower with a big single that's hard to spool, smoky. It's just not near as well behaved.
And we prefer that because we like a daily driver pickup truck to where we can take it to town and drive it every day or drive it every other day.
Right.
And so that's why we prefer it like that.
And like as far as a 1,000 horsepower truck on stock internals, if you are building your own truck up to that level and you have the ability to, I guess, have some self-control and not do stupid things with your truck, I can see that lasting a lot longer rather than buying a setup like that from someone. You don't know what they've done with that truck. I mean, one big, long, nasty burnout where EGTs get high, you might have cracked rings, or, if it is a truck with twins, you might have bent rods in it. The thing might run. It might just be a little bit slow starting. And like I remember when Paul Cato had the red truck here when he worked for us, like that truck, I think for close to a year would slow start and it would smoke. And we were like, man, it's just kind of weird. Like
sputters, white smoke like crazy.
But when it warmed up, it was great. And he just kept driving it. Well, turns out that was the indication of the broken rod that was to come. So definitely, I guess, our typical answer would be is if you want a stock internals truck and you need it to be a daily, dependable daily driver, I think we would be much more likely to target the 850 horsepower range.
Absolutely.
Rather than go for that 1,000 number. It can be done, but kind of running up against it.
Right. It really comes down to how much of a risk are you willing to put yourself in as far as...
And the higher your horsepower number is, the higher your maintenance costs are going to be, period. You're making more cylinder pressure. It's harder on parts. It's just in the long run, it's going to cost you more money. So I see a lot of people spend their very last dollar to build a setup, but then they don't have the money to keep it running. And Absolutely. I hate to see that.
Yeah. Like to be able to enjoy a setup once it's done and something goes wrong with it.
And I also think that people that have never driven a 1,000 horsepower truck don't really know what 1,000 horsepower is. Like, you would be amazed the fun that you can have and how fast 850 is or whatever.
And this will be kind of going back to around the shop where we had a customer just pick up, Jake LaVenture picked up his truck, and where you go from a mostly stock power plant to a 15, or I forget I think it was just shy
made around 1,500,
where it was a world of a difference for him from what I believe. And it's just another level of going from that 800 horsepower to 1,000 and then making that next jump is just significant.
Yep. The other thing I want to talk about is we are finally only about 2.5 weeks away from the ODSS season. So seems like winter never quite wants to go away, and living in Ohio, it still isn't fully gone. Like yesterday, it was still pretty wintry and gets kind of frustrating.
But just last Saturday, we saw snow flurries.
It was snowing last Saturday, but finally just around the corner from race season. So I thought it would be a good time to talk a little bit about what it takes to race and some of the safety requirements associated with the different classes. It's a question that Greg always gets flooded with every year. What do I need to run this class? We get asked it quite a bit from our customers. I'll just run through some of the classes real quick. We won't really address much with the pro classes, because if you're running Pro Street or Pro Mod or Top Dragster, I think you can figure it out for yourself. But kind of starting with ET, the main thing I want to stress about ET is if you have a diesel vehicle, you can run. Anybody can come race. There's no need for you to just come and spectate. You can. You have just as good of chance of winning as the guy that has 800 horsepower that's running that class.
Absolutely.
So don't be scared to jump in. There's not much of any requirements there. The main thing is, like, obviously you can't have leaking oil, can't have a cracked windshield. Your battery needs to be secured. I don't know. Is there anything else you can think of that people run into on that? I mean,
those are the main things.
Yeah. So nothing fancy needed for that class. Come run your slow truck or your slow diesel car if you have one, or even run your fast truck in that if you like. Pretty much all you need to do is to try to be consistent, and you pick the time that you think your vehicle can run, and you want to try to run as close to that as possible. And if you run faster than that, then you lose. So it's all about knowing your vehicle and becoming consistent. And so all of the index classes are a lot the same type of thing. It's just now you get a set a set ET, a set time that you're going to be running. So everyone's targeting the same time. So there's a 670 class, the 770 class. I got that. So 770, then 670, then 590 are the three other index classes. 770, you ran that for how many years you run that?
I actually only ran, well, I would have run it for 3 years.
Okay, with your truck.
With my truck.
Ryan Riddle's the king there. Well, there might be a few others that might argue that.
Well, I dropped out to let him have it, so I figured I'd...
Yeah.
No, really.
770 doesn't take just much more, requirement-wise, you need to have a helmet, and I don't need to have a jacket.
Helmet past, no, you do not have to have a helmet or a jacket until 640.
Okay. So you need to have a helmet to run 770, and really all of this stuff is based on NHRA regulations. If you have any questions, if you go to ODSS's website, there is a rules page. You can download all of ODSS's rules, and they have a kind of a quick cheat sheet. I think I have it printed out here. Covers all of the requirements as far as helmets and jackets and shoes and gloves, and there's different levels as you go. So I could spend another 20 minutes going over everything, but just make sure that before you get to the racetrack, you have your bases covered. And I know every year it seems like, especially in 590, there's some frustration at the first race of the year where somebody shows up, doesn't realize what they were going to need to race. The other big thing for 590 class is you are required to have an NHRA license. Like I said, Outlaw Diesel Super Series on their page has all the rules. You can go there, and then also the 2022 NHRA rule book is online, so it takes a little bit to learn how to look for everything in there, but you can find everything in that rule book as well. So, and also don't be scared to ask questions if you have any, hesitations about what you have. So, and then also right around the corner, not too long after Wagglers, is UCC, and I know we haven't talked about that much yet, but I think we're going to get that ramped up here as soon as we're done with the Wagglers event. But last year was a really good show. It's the first year that we combined ODSS race with UCC. So that really made a lot better action alongside the UCC event. So if you haven't bought your tickets yet, go to ultimatecalloutchallenge.com. Use the code Firepunk as a coupon code. It'll save you money, and it helps us recoup some of the money that we have invested in putting on the race there. There's quite a bit of upfront costs there with doing payouts and everything, and that allows us to be able to recoup some of the ticket money if you use the coupon code Firepunk. So we'll talk about UCC more in the weeks to come. So yeah, let's get started with the good stuff.
All right.
We're going to talk a little bit just about Landon's racing career, I guess you might call it, and some of the memories you have of the Pro Street truck and anything, that you've done here in Firepunk. So I might introduce Landon a little bit for those of you that don't know. He is my baby brother. There's four of us, and he's the youngest of us boys, and then Rolanda's younger than him yet. But when did you first start working here at Firepunk?
It would have been the fall of 2016.
2016. So right getting into Pro Street era.
Yep. So within the first month of me working here is when Levon came home with the Pro Street truck. And in that process, I got to help from the very beginning of simply pulling the interior out of the Pro Street truck. And that's what really got me, that first 6 to 8 months of me working here really kind of was very eye-opening to me. Like, wow, this is more to building a race truck than just putting an engine and a transmission into it.
I think it was pretty eye-opening for all of us because we definitely got a lot more involved in that thing than what we had on anything leading up to that. So did you have a truck at that point?
I did not. I didn't have a truck until the winter of 17, 18. So it was about the beginning of 18. And I really spent a lot of time that year crewing for the Pro Street truck, and we put a lot of work into it. It was that year had some of the most memorable times in my life as far as starting and learning so much. Yeah. Whereas
it's kind of bad for me because, like, man, I can't keeping all this stuff separate and remembering how it all went is really.
I will never forget going 827 in the Pro Street truck, and I didn't even realize how fast. I didn't comprehend how fast that was at the time. That's how new of a racer I was at that point, not being around it that much. Right. But I loved it. Yeah. And that's really what got me the bug to buy a truck, and really what got me into the ET class. So
how much, so you had worked at ER here next door leading up to that. How much, I don't really remember, like, had you come to races with us much before then, or like?
I had been to a Shide race where Levon had the triples on for 670, and he pulled me up to the starting line and watched Seth Sullivan just drive around everybody. And that was, I'm like, holy crap, this is insane. This is absolutely nuts. Yeah. So that was my very first diesel experience, would have been Shide of, I'm assuming 17. Okay. And that was another eye-opening to see that, hey, we're building a truck to compete with those guys that I saw out there. Like, wow, this is almost intimidating.
Right. Yep. So you bought your truck, you said, you thought around 2017.
Beginning of 18.
That was a little bit of a project truck, or I can't really remember for sure.
I bought the truck. Okay. Had to basically, I put a tune on it, and soon after I needed to go through the transmission. Okay. So we pulled the trans apart and put an input shaft in it, and we were ready to go.
So you're about the only Miller, well, maybe not the only, you're one of the only Millers that didn't buy a project truck, because I bought a truck with a hole in the block, and Larson bought a burnt truck, and Rolanda bought, I don't remember. Hers was just a really rough truck.
Pulled it off the side of the road from a fuel leak.
Had a whole list of things to go through, but anyhow, I could have a hard time keeping all that apart. But so you helped with the Pro Street truck the first, would you say 2 years or? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I would have been on Pro Street crew as long as Firepunk owned the truck.
Okay. Gotcha.
So coming into the second year of Pro Street, I started racing ET. And so I'd be making a pass at ET in between rounds. I'm getting my hands dirty, helping out with anything needed on the Pro Street truck. Gotcha. And really the first year, I guess I'm not sure how fast we want to jump into racing specifically, but I raced a year of ET where, I mean, my truck I'd be running 840s. Fairly consistently.
Did you do decent that year? Like, you win any events or anything of that sort?
I won a single event at TS. So I finished 7th or 8th overall in ET.
Gotcha. Just comes back to the point of you can take any truck, literally. You can go race all season. You might not necessarily be great at it at first. You did get an event win, I guess.
Actually, no, that's wrong. I made it into the money. I made it in the money. So I never actually won a race the first year, but.
Really, you need to take a lot of trees before you're going to be super good, unless you get lucky, I guess, a time or two. But
I'd say I took every bit of 50 to 60 trees or passes without including test passes before I actually won a race. So I had over a year of racing in my belt before I won my first race.
What are some of your, like, what are some of your memories of UCC specifically? Like, I guess leading up to it, or like, is there any stories that stick out to you?
I feel like most of the stories that I would have been covered in previous episodes. Overall, the main things that stuck out to me were very clearly the Sigma engine swap, how just incredibly, how many hands-on hours were needed for that and what got into that. Going out to Salt Lake City was pretty cool.
That was pretty cool. The drive sucked because it was so long, but I do remember like just some of the scenery that you drive through going out there. I mean, I remember a herd of elk crossing, or well, maybe not crossing the road, but being like up along the interstate as we traveled, and then coming into Salt Lake. Like, that's a pretty incredible view there, coming out of the mountains down into Salt Lake, and then like some of the scenery there out there at the sled pulling track and some of that stuff. So really cool area to visit if you ever get the chance.
Right.
Just try not to drive with a truck or 3 trucks and 3 trailers. It's not a very fun ride. You say you raced ET 1 year?
Yeah.
And then you went to 770 from there?
So the following year, I put a turbo injectors and CP3 on my truck to race 770. At the same time, I was racing the quad cab in 670. So I took a jump from ET straight to double classing or triple classing 2 different trucks.
Okay.
So,
and that was the point where you became fairly not available for the Pro Street truck, because you were pretty much living in a truck in the staging lanes at one point, or pretty much all day long. So
I was able to watch Pro Street and Pro Mod, or Dragster and Pro Mod, and then typically around Pro Street, by the time 590 came in, that's where I was needing to head out of the starting line and hop into a truck.
Have any idea, like, typically how many passes you'd make in a weekend?
I had a weekend at TS where we were double class, or we had 2 races in the one weekend where
they ran like a Friday or a Saturday. It would have been a Friday and a Saturday race.
Yeah,
I think they did that at Scheid sometimes, where they'd have like a Friday race that wasn't a points race, and then Saturday, I
forget the specifics about it, but I do remember I came home from a TS race where I had 31 passes in one single weekend.
That's crazy.
That was just pretty awesome, because I remember that was the first weekend I got my perfect reaction time, my first perfect reaction time. And that was up there with one of the most memorable times that I've had.
Yeah.
But overall, I'd say out of my racing highlight, my most memorable time, I could think back to Scheid of, I believe it was 2018. It was either 18 or 19, because I do remember it was a 2-day race, a Saturday and Sunday race, where I won. Saturday, I won ET in 770 in my truck, and then the following day, I won 670 in the quad cab.
Okay.
So I came home with 3 trophies in a weekend, and I was on top of the world.
Yeah, that's pretty slick. Road tripping, like, we put a lot of miles on it. What is your, I would say, either most miserable road trip, or like a breakdown that sticks out to you, or you have any crazy road trip stories that you can remember?
The main one that sticks out to me is the first year that Cody was running Charity Case in 590, or the year he was running it. So Cody bought his mega cab, and he hadn't really taken it on any kind of crazy long trips towing a trailer. So halfway into that trip, we started out late at night, and we didn't make it but an hour out of Columbus, and it turns out I hit a pothole hard enough the tailgate fell off the quad cab, and it was just dragging, where middle of the night, I saw sparks in my rearview mirror, and that's what made me stop and pull over. So I ended up throwing the tailgate into the side-by-side that had been on the gooseneck and just kept on rolling. And it wasn't but 2 or 3 hours later that Cody had some injector issue, where he was his injectors were putting fuel in his oil.
Okay.
So we ended up at that point, I had to pull my truck off the trailer and hook it to Charity Case and swap.
We've done a lot of truck swapping over the years and towing to races and stuff. But I mean, didn't you do a good bit of, like, I guess the year that you were running both trucks, you would have had one on the trailer and the other one towing it. Did you typically tow with yours, or?
I actually
So
did it for 2 years.
Okay.
Where I raced the three classes, but I would hook the quad cab up to the gooseneck, and I feel like this is more of a Levon wanting to to tow a 670 truck,
Right.
and I would pull it off the gooseneck, swap wheels and tires, put the cage in it, and pull my truck off and race it in 770. And
there's a good bit of work involved in that. Like, I mean, changing tires and putting the roll cage in and like prep getting ready for the weekend. It's not all roses, I guess.
Right. All while there's still a pro street truck to be worked on and get attention to. And so I had a lot of time in prepping for races, specifically getting it, changing oil, doing maintenance, and fixing anything that breaks between. So I had a lot of prep time between.
When you have 3 or 4 people keeping one vehicle going, it's not that bad. But when everybody starts getting their own race vehicles, even at the 670 or 770 level, it seems like there's always something to get ready leading up to the race time. So last year you ran your truck in 670s?
Well, I tried to as much as it would allow me to.
That is true. It ended up being about half and half. But you just ran one entry in 670 last year, correct?
Yeah. Well, the previous 2 years I've run strictly 770 or 670.
Okay.
Where previous year I was running the quad cab, and then last year I decided I wanted to at least give it a go in my truck, and I wanted to do what I could to do the same thing in my personal truck. So that was my goal that I set out, and ultimately for the goal to be doing it in my personal truck didn't end up panning out quite as well as I was hoping to. I ended up winning our ODR UCC 670, and then coming to, well, I would have red lit in the second round of Rudy's, and that would have actually been my only loss for the year.
Okay.
So coming up to Rocky Top, I made it halfway there, and I had some pump issues, and we're spun a pump bushing. So I had Blake, or a local friend, load up the quad cab on the gooseneck and bring it down with Larson so we could do a swap. Ended up racing the quad cab.
Well, and that ended up being a whole thing in itself, because he loaded up the quad cab, and as far as we knew, the thing, well, it was running perfectly fine when it ran home, or when we left home, and he put it on the gooseneck and ran it down there, and you go to start it, or you tried to spool it.
Q1.
Okay, so Q1 goes up there, truck wouldn't spool, and come to discover that the atmosphere turbo had been spinning on the trailer the whole way down and didn't have any lubrication, and it locked up. So luckily, your truck runs the same turbo as the quad cab, so you were able to rob your turbo and put it on the quad cab, and then ended up working just fine. Yeah. So
my truck was a parts truck that weekend because Cody needed a valve body too, and so he pulled a valve body out of my truck going to his. Yeah. But we could go
We've had a couple of those weekends where a broken vehicle turns into a parts truck, and then you come home and you're like, man, why did I do this? Because you got so much stuff to put back together, and it just makes a hard job even harder to get it all together for the next race. So you've raced 670 for a total of what, 3 years or 4?
4, I believe.
4. And how many championships have you won in 670? 3. And then 770, did you win any championships in 770?
I never did. I got second and third place.
Okay.
Those are all still battles with Ryan Riddle and Nick Morris, and I'd have to go back and to see what the final rankings were in there. Because those are the two, I feel like there were so many that I'm leaving out, but those were some very fun competitive races. 770 is impressive. Impressive.
Well, I will go back. I know a lot of people don't like the idea of index racing, but there's a lot of really good racing. Look at somebody like Ryan Riddle. Like, he's been satisfied running his truck in 770. Everybody has the bug for going faster and wants to keep jumping up classes. And sometimes they do it faster than what they probably should, where you're almost racing outside of your means. And somebody like Ryan, who's been able to just stay in that one class and just go lap after lap after lap, he wins a lot of races. He's really hard to beat. and it doesn't cost him near the money as it does a lot of people, and it might even make him money. I'm not really sure. I know he's had some pretty impressive years with how much he's won. So just keep that in mind when you think you need to go faster. Sometimes staying where you're at and racing within your means is better than just always pushing the edge. So, all right, well, we're going to wrap it up for today. I know that there's things that are probably not perfect, and I think this is going to be something that's going to kind of evolve as it goes. So if you guys have ideas of things you want us to talk about, I know that we have a list of things. I know nitrous is kind of a hot topic that we'd like to address at some point. There's a couple different things like that. But if you have ideas for weekly things or certain people you'd like us to talk to, at some point we're going to get a remote set up to where we can have guests on. So if you have any input as to what we talk about or maybe who we talk to, make sure you drop a comment, and we'll see you guys next week.